Actually, I just have some very brief comments that I would like to share with you in regard to the budgeting process for the 2012-2013 budget that is being presented to you this evening. Basically, the process was a two-step process, if you will. It started with budget assumptions, and then from the budget assumptions, it moved into putting numbers into the budget document. So my responsibility as an independent third party was to review those assumptions, and I reviewed them based upon industry information and industry standards. Once it was determined that these budget assumptions were fair and reasonable, we then moved into reviewing the numbers that were put to those budget assumptions. So looking at both the budgeted revenues and the budgeted expenditures to verify that they were reasonable and consistent with the budget assumptions that were devised. All of that was done. As part of that process, we also verified revenues based on information we obtained by third parties, information that we obtained from the Chancellor's Office, the California League of Community Colleges, the Controller's Office, and also the Department of Finance. So there we tied out a lot of the major revenue streams that you have in your unrestricted general fund, apportionment, some categoricals that are recorded within that fund, property taxes, enrollment fees, lottery revenue, and those various revenue streams. The next area we focused on were expenditures, going back to the budget assumptions that were originally devised. We looked at positions, we looked at salaries, looked at the benefits that are associated with those salaries, as well as preparing an analysis of the various expenses we have for administrative and support costs. As a result of all that work that was done, it is my conclusion that the budget prepared by management is reasonable and based on sound practices.
Are there any questions of Ms. Graves? Go ahead.
Have you had a chance to go over the information that we've just had presented to us by the predecessor speaker?
I had looked at your board packet Friday evening and had printed out those documents. The one that we were presented tonight are a little bit different than what was included in your board packet. The one comment that I can make is that the expenses, the savings of $5.9 million, I believe, that was indicated is not included in the 12-13 budget would not be a correct statement. Those amounts are included in the budget numbers. There are things that are offsetting those savings. There are salary increases, there are vacancies that are being filled in some very key positions. So those are some increases that are included in this budget. There are items that, and I can probably have, if management wants to help me out here and see if my memory is correct. There are some items that were not funded in the prior year that are included in this year's budget. The big one is being the contribution to your GASB 45 obligation, or to, I believe you refer to that as Fund 64. That is included in this year's budget. So there's some additions that are in the budget that were not picked up in the previous presentation.
That's very helpful, and I guess what colleague of mine on my days at City Council in past, John Crowley, used to say that we ought not to argue over the facts. The numbers are the numbers, and we ought to be able to reach agreement on those. And so to have two very different presentations given with utilizing presumably the same information, the same facts, is kind of frustrating and difficult to come to some resolution of that. So it would be very helpful if, I don't know what our deadline is by which we have to take action on this, but it'd be very helpful if we could in some way get to the bottom of the difference in the numbers and the facts and figure out where we are.
Before, do you want to respond as to what the deadline is for the adoption of the budget?
I want to say September 15th is the deadline.
Trustee Wong?
On the budget, does this also include the encumbered or allocated funds that maybe aren't being shown in line items, so we know that they're already tagged or designated for certain expenditures?
Those would be included in the budget. There are certain amounts, if services were provided by June 30th, then those were accrued as a liability at June 30th. So that amount is already taken out and reflected in that ending surplus amount. But then other amounts that are encumbered would be included in the budget for this next year. And you have some encumbrance type items that are multi-year commitments. An example of that would be the CERT payment that you need to pay over, I believe it's a 5-year period. So that is not, the full amount is not budgeted. It will be budgeted on an annual basis as each of those payments are due. But that would be considered a designation of your ending fund balance. So, and I know in prior presentations, we just talked about the fund balance as a total amount, that 20,700,000 figure. But all of that is not available for spending because there are certain designations that are required under GAAP accounting, governmental GAAP accounting.
Thank you.
Dr. Mann.
I don't think that there's a difference in the figures, since the presentation we just saw used many of the numbers that came from the college. I mean, we were using our own budget figures. To me, it's a difference in the interpretation of what can be done with that. Now, I distinctly remember that we had a presentation about cash flow and the possibility, which we were alerted to by our auditors over a year ago, that we almost ran out of money a year ago. It cost, our payroll is what, $20 million a month, and projecting it out, we could see that if the state does defer the payment, as the governor has said he will do, whether or not Proposition 30 passes or not, that we will reach a point where we will probably have to borrow money. Is that correct? So I don't think we're saying, we're not agreeing that we have this amount of money in reserve. I think my understanding is it's there because of this system that the governor particularly has of deferring our payments, and that we have to be able to make our payroll. And I think all the faculty in the room would agree that they would very much like to get their checks every month. Am I correct on that? So I don't think we're disagreeing that there's 20 whatever it is $million. I think we're just disagreeing. I think the question is that the board, my understanding, when we actually took the action to authorize the loan, projected that that money would run out sometime around November or so, and that we might have to borrow money regardless of whether or not the governor's initiative passed. It's also my understanding that the governor has indicated that even if the initiative passes, that we will not actually get any additional funding until maybe May. And so there is a possibility of even longer deferrals. That's my understanding, particularly from you mentioned the California League of Community Colleges, and I'm on the board and I have heard many presentations on that. That's my understanding. So I actually don't see that there's any difference in the numbers of Trustee Thompson. I think the difference is in the understanding of what those numbers mean and what we can do with it, except maybe these numbers she was talking about different things. But the 20.6, 20.8, 20.7, I was almost there. We're not saying that that's not there. I think what we're saying is that we have to have it there for cash flow. And so for that reason, I feel comfortable with approving the budget as presented by the administration.
So before you do that.
No, I'm not going to, that was my question.
Because I want to then go and do the procedural mode, operation of closing the public hearing,
Yeah.
and then moving into item G, which is now for consideration for the board, the
Okay.
adoption of the budget, and then if there's further discussion, then we can go into that there. So, and so there's item G is the actual action before the board recommended budget, and so I want to open it up to the board members.
Did you close the hearing?
I did.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear.
Yeah.
It was a very light laugh.
And so, is there an additional presentation?
Well, all I would do is this. I would ask, we do not have a presentation. I would ask Senior Vice President Miller and Marie DeScalvo to the table so that they can assist in answering any questions. And in presenting item G on the agenda to you, I would say this. First of all, the adoption of the proposed 12-13 budget and fund allocations is all right there for you to see. This is the fourth and final draft of this budget. The first draft of it, based on the assumptions that Ms. Graves were talking about, was first presented to you on at the meeting of July 18th in Altadena, if you recall that. And in the course, we encourage your questions, but I think that you have all the issues properly framed. It is a budget on July 18th, the budget that we presented in terms of responding to the budget crisis, and it is a budget crisis. I don't know of any independent accountant, of any public agency or any public school or any public community college in the state of California would define what we are in as anything other than a budget crisis. The revenue to the college and to all public agencies has plummeted. So that is certainly a fact. At the July 18th meeting, this budget does take from reserves almost $2 million in order to balance it. You will notice that our expenditures this year, which are 90% of the budget, which are far into the red zone of the percentage of salaries and benefits to total expenditure, are actually up over last year. On July 18th, at that meeting, the board gave the administration clear guidance, and its guidance was basically twofold: that it wanted a balanced budget, and if you recall, I proposed essentially taking more money out of reserves by borrowing money to make up still more of the shortfall. The board's clear guidance to the administration on that date was not to do that. So we have returned with a budget that is open, correct, credible, and has been completely supervised by an independent accounting firm. So I submit it to you for adoption.
Okay, so we have a recommendation from the administration about the budget. Is there a motion to adopt the budget as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, so the motion is second. So now there's discussion on the budget as presented. Are there any further questions that board members have? I have a question, but I want to see if any others do. Trustee Thompson.
Well, the history of the how we got to where we are this evening is certainly important, but what I find somewhat disconcerting is that we assume that we agree on the $20.7 million surplus that our accountant has mentioned. So let's just assume for purpose of our discussion that everybody agrees on that number. Where do we differ as to how that number is going to be spent? I'd really like to have that presentation, particularly in light of what we've had presented this evening by the Faculty Association, so that we can get our arms around this and knowingly make a decision based upon what we believe to be the best information we have.
Well, can you rephrase the question? I got a little lost there.
Well, you've got one group saying we've got money left over, we don't have to go out and lay off or cut sections or lay off people or do away with the winter intersession or anything else. We have the administration saying, well, yes, we do. We seem to agree, or at least I'm suggesting we agree for purposes of our discussion, that we have a surplus of $20.7 million. What's the difference?
I'm not sure. I'm understanding exactly the difference for the 20,700,000. I think the difference is in the total expenses and whether they are, I'm sorry, glasses are a new thing for me, so I haven't figured out how to work the system out here. But I think the difference that you're trying to discuss is the total expenditures on the budget are 111,000. What's being proposed,
111 million.
I'm sorry, thank you, 111 million. And the proposal in the earlier presentation is to reduce that amount by 5.9, and expenditures would there be 104 million. And the information I don't have at my fingertips are what amounts were added to the budget to come up with that 111 million. The 5.9 million has been taken out of the budget by these cost-saving measures, but there are amounts that have been added to it because of positions, funding of your GASB 45. You have new buildings that are coming online that have additional utility costs, supply costs. Costs in general are increasing. Gasoline costs, utility costs are increasing just in general.
And in addition to that, we're moving roughly $900,000 of software costs and business education costs that were funded for several years out of Fund 41 into the operational line items where they belong. So, although we won't take the time now unless the board wants, I could actually go through this summary page by page and show you where all of the increases are by way of increases in, for example, our CERP expenses are $1.4 million that we're funding. Our health is up 5.5% across the board.
Where are those cost increases summarized?
So, for example, if you look at page 7 on the budget summary, which is and if under employee benefits, that's correct, yes. The SERS increases are up are 8.25% of our overall. Our health welfare, the 33491, that's up 5.5%. Down at the bottom where it says PARS, where it says 3911 through 3930, that's where the PARS CERP expenses are. That's an additional expense of 1.4 million. So,
well, in general, I'm reading the total benefits was 24.2 last year, and this year you're recommending 25.2. So, in general, though the number of staff have gone down, the benefits have gone up $1 million.
That's correct. That's correct.
Actually, the benefits, that 24 was the budget. The actual was 23 million.
Okay, and it's gone up $1.7 million.
Right. So,
Whatever, it's gone up. So that's part of it.
that's part of it. I mean, I could go through page by page and actually and be able to pick these out and show you where it is. And that was part of the budget exercise and the hard work that Marie and her staff and others, college management, what have you, worked on. We had to balance these increased costs with our decreased revenue and try to maintain service levels to the best extent that we could. Those 578 sections that unfortunately we can't fund right now, if we did fund them, they'd cost us over $3 million that we don't have.
I have a question, but go ahead, Trustee Thompson.
Go ahead.
I wanted to get back because in addition to the point made by the Faculty Association, I heard it from others. Why wouldn't we indicate on our quarterly financial report that there are significant financial problems facing the district?
Well, I'm going to ask Renee to speak to that, but I would say this, that one of the reasons why I signed it as no is because we are fiscally sound. And that in order to stay fiscally sound, we're recommending this budget to you. On the topic of the 20 million or 18 million, not all that is cash, first of all. And secondly, a lot of that, as I think was earlier mentioned by Renee, is already allocated, it's already accounted for, and not necessarily available for funding classes or things like that. It's complex in that regard.
Now, you represent a lot of other districts. Under what circumstance would the district indicate that there are significant financial problems facing it?
Oftentimes, it has become a political response back to the chancellor's office. Occasionally, I will see a district that answers yes in that, and then has a laundry list of all the issues that they are dealing with, the state budget cutbacks, increased costs and benefits, and they will have a super expanded paragraph explaining all of the difficulties that they are encountering. And it's more of a political statement back to the chancellor's office. There have been, I would say, 1 or 2 districts that have truly been in a financial situation. The one that comes to mind there is Compton Community College District, when they were about to lose their accreditation. And they, of course, answered yes in that category. But by far, most districts will answer no in that area because they do have issues that they have to deal with, but they are dealing with them. So it's not a point that they are asking the chancellor's office to come in and provide any type of assistance or talk even getting close to talking about putting in an administrative trustee or something of that nature.
So what are the ramifications of answering yes or no on that question? What are the consequences? Does it trigger any type of action one way or the other?
Not unless the numbers support it. So if your percentage of fund balance is below that 3% required reserve, if you're below the reserve and you're saying yes, that would trigger a response from the chancellor's office. If your percentage is over and you're saying yes, it is being interpreted as more of a political statement, and the chancellor's office will not contact them. A number of years ago, there was the watch list. I don't know if that's a term that's familiar to any of you, but that was based more on the percentage of the reserve versus what was indicated on the 311Q.
And I'll just add, the ACCJC, our accrediting body, has basically indicated that they are actually going to begin with a watch list, if you will, from an accreditation point of view in the area of fiscal matters. That's something we know about.
Other trustees have questions? Well, then I'll make a statement and then we'll move to a vote. But the 2 most important things a trustee does is hire and manage the president of the district and then adopt a budget. And I don't dispute a lot of the numbers that Professor Hammond came, but the budget is a statement of principles about how the district's going to be governed and where we're going to focus our resources. And notwithstanding the pledge that I made to the people in my district and others was to manage the finances very conservatively. And there may be people that might want you to spend money one way or another. I feel very comfortable with the principles of the administration of the district as articulated by the budget, and I will continue to hold the administration accountable for those numbers. And I honestly believe this, that the decisions we made last week and this week will actually go a long way to helping us improve access and ensuring there's more seats available for students both in the spring and in the summer semesters. So I think this is a move in the right direction and support the budget. Trustee Martin.
I'm going to make some generic comments all related to the budget.